and a gentleman to the well-being of the black man and to the emancipation of our race and to the beautification or having our nation, Nigeria, fulfill its purpose and be a great place, where everyone can enjoy and fulfill their potential. If Singapore can be great, if Malaysia can be on the path of greatness, if Dubai, that 40 years ago was a virtual desert, can be what it is today, how can Nigeria, with all the great potential that God has bestowed us with, be great? So over the last few years, I've been doing a lot of research, thinking, planning, praying, meditating, and consulting various people on what really is, number one, the foundation of Nigeria. What was Nigeria founded on? Why? The Bible says if the foundation be destroyed, if the foundation is bad, the building will not be appropriate. It says, what can the righteous do? If you try to do right things on a bad foundation, it is unlikely that it will succeed. So the foundation and the founding of Nigeria. Secondly, on the history and the interaction of Nigeria, especially among the tribes. And then thirdly, on the situation of Nigeria and what we can do to make Nigeria good and to ensure there's the right kind of leadership in every facet of Nigeria and in non-governmental Nigeria, so that we can really have a beautiful, beautiful country.
Yes, I believe you grew up in Ibadan.
Correct.
What was life like? Could you tell us about education from primary to secondary, up to the point you moved to Lagos, and what you think those of us who are growing up today can learn from that experience?
Well, I was born at the tip of independence in 1961. So Nigeria was coming out of British colonial rule. Ibadan was the biggest city in West Africa at that time. I grew up, first of all, in Western region before it became Western State in 1966-67. And we had the vestiges of colonial influence in Ibadan. It was an idyllic town of great population. I grew up without barbed wires. I grew up without walls separating houses. I grew up without burglary proof. I grew up on what they call the rotary phone, and I grew up on the black and white television, where pounds at that time, before the decimalization, we grew up with people driving right-hand driven cars, and therefore you drove on the left side of the road. So it was in our very presence that Gowon changed us to left-hand driven cars and the campaign at that time. It was in our presence that Gowon decimalized our currency and the Naira, apparently the name given by Chief Awolowo, which was equal to 10 shillings at that time, was what we took over with. And that Naira was the equivalent of about £1 British or 95 or 98 pence at the time. And it was about the equivalent of $2 at the time. I remember going abroad in 1978 for summer, and I took £5 and stamped my passport. 300 Naira bought me a ticket to London, return ticket on Nigerian Airways. So with 800 Naira, I had a very, very good summer holiday. Spent 4 weeks in London, brought back 2 or 3 suitcases, and had begun my next school term. I didn't have to queue in British Embassy to get a visa. I walked to the British Consul's office in Dube, in Ibadan. I was about 16 or 17 years old. I simply told him I wanted to go to London. I showed him an airway letter of invitation from my in-law. We had this airway, blue air. I'm sure you know, Dele. You probably whatever they call it, light letters that came quicker than the ones in envelopes.
The telegram.
Not telegram. Airmail. They used to call it airmail. It was blue. You wrote on it and then you stuck it together and then you put it in the post. It was a very light letter. Instead of using an envelope, you wrote on that. It was blue thing. And I showed him that and told him I was going to London for vacation. He didn't ask me who my father was, who my mother was, what they did or anything. He says, okay, no problem. He said, come back in 2 days for your visa. And I got my visa for... and the next year I went to London, UK for school. It was very simple, very easy, very predictable life. There were lots of industries being established. Education was free. Okay, you had the model schools, ICC, and so on and so forth, established by Awolowo since the 50s. Everybody who wanted to go to school was allowed to go to school. Some schools ended in more than 3, and then went to University of Ibadan, which was one of the best universities in Africa, possibly in the Commonwealth. UCH was the 4th best hospital in the Commonwealth. You had Indians coming to Nigeria to learn medicine and to practice and so on and so forth. Everything was orderly. Kingsway stores, Leventi stores, Father Christmas Grotto. You bought anything you wanted on the streets of Nigeria. And Nigeria could feed itself. Even the oil wasn't there at the time. We lived on crop of cocoa, palm kernel, cotton, groundnuts, and palm oil. Those were the cash crops that we studied in school, and so on and so forth. So we had a beautiful country that was planned, 5-year development plan, 10-year development plan. My mother was permanent secretary, economic planning, then permanent secretary information, then permanent secretary home affairs. She was a top woman, permanent secretary at that time, the first lady permanent secretary. And that's the way we grew. You know, everybody respected the rule of law. There was minimal corruption at the time. Judges were feared, lecturers were respected, teachers were admired, and civil servants were on top at that time. But it's a robbery. I said we didn't have burglary proof. You know, low hedges, round houses in GRA. There was no need for all those things. If you caught a thief, he probably stole a few tomatoes or a goat in the market, and people would promptly round him up and deal with him. Or they ask you what's his father's name and take him back to his father's compound. There was peace in Nigeria until the Civil War started. Okay, and even during the Civil War, we still were able to maintain a decent economy on the federal side. Our Easterners, they had a lot of problem and challenge. Do that Civil War, Awolowo was Minister of Finance, and we came out of there and started building Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, Aramco, built Peugeot in Kaduna, started building the refineries and things like that. And Gawan said in that time that Nigeria's problem was not money, it was what to do with it. So this was the Nigeria we grew in at the time, and those were fantastic days. The only drawback was that the telecommunications was a bit poor. But if you had a phone, you could get your lines if you were patient enough to wait for the operator. Nigeria, we had a lot of promise. A lot of people looked at us and called us the giant of Africa and thought that within a few years we'll be almost first world. That was the promise that Nigeria gave the world, and that's what we were all looking forward to. I went to King's College in 1973, January. So that was my first move to Lagos. I was in the boarding house from 1973, January to 1977. Then I went back to Ibadan for my A-levels, 1977 to 1979. And then I
Where in Ibadan?
ISI, International School.
ISI, okay.
Which was also That was the family tradition. My sister did the same, Queen's College ISI. My brother also did the same, King's College ISI. And I followed that tradition. They both went to Tolu and also went to UI, but I decided to go to England for my university education. And I went to the University of Hull. So that's the time I now left home completely in 79. When I came back in 82 for my youth corps, I went to work in Lagos, in Price Waterhouse. And that's when I moved to Lagos. By this time, the trajectory of Nigeria was changing. Lagos had become the center of economic activity, and as at that time was the capital of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Ibadan had receded. By this time, it was now Western states getting into Oyo and Ogun states, and Lagos had been carved out, and Ibadan was being generally getting smaller and smaller in terms of activity and influence. Places like Akure were beginning to be built up because of these states, and so on and so forth. And this was how, and Abeokuta, of course, capital of Ogun State at that time. When the throes of the Second Republic, when I came back, Shehu Shagari was president of Nigeria at that time, before the 1984 coup that brought Buhari into power for the first time. Okay, and thereafter Babangida took over in August 1985, I think it was. And up until that 1985, although had become too corrupt, they had spent too much money, they had wasted our resource, they had started affecting our economy, which was the excuse that Babangida and co gave for taking over power from Shagari and so on and so forth. In retrospect, I don't agree with that excuse. I think they should have allowed our politics to evolve, and I'm sure that the corruption that they did was nowhere near what happened subsequently. But this was now the beginning of, I think, the downward spiral of the Nigerian economy, which eventually from subsequent devaluations. I think when Nigeria and the oil revenues were so humongous that we began to abandon and so on and so forth. I think if the military had left us back in our regional settings, and each region with a small central government, I think Nigeria would have prospered a lot better.
Fantastic. Now, the issue of unity is one that really concerns me. When you were in school, I heard you were classmates with the former emir of Kano. What was unity like then? Was there this type of discrimination, north-south divide at that time?
King's College, the school that by the British in 1909 to build leaders, people they wanted to go into the civil service, people they wanted to go into military, people they wanted to be leaders of Nigeria, after the fashion of Eton. Eton is a public school in Britain, and it has produced about 20 or so, between 8 and 20 prime ministers in Britain. So King's College was actually, the school in Eton is called King's College upon Eton. So they formed King's College in that caliber. That was the school that Aida went to, Asiodu went to, Odumegwu Ojukwu went to, Prince the Ademiluis went to, the Akpatas went to, quite a lot of them. And in the north, they established Barewa College to do something similar and produce quite a lot of leaders, and quite a lot of leaders from the north went through Barewa College. So King's College was formed as the first unity school, 12 states at the time, and therefore they took the best 3 from every from common entrance, and then the best 3 from every state to come into King's College. So we had a big spread. There was everybody from every state in King's College, and they were typically perhaps the best brains of that class, of that generation, the best. Most of them accepted, some didn't. Competing against some of the best. Now, because of different levels of development, you may find but usually within a year, they came out, okay? But then in King's College, you didn't know. Baba Gana Mungono was my brother's classmate, the present security is our present president, Kim Bello Osage, the Alukos, brilliant boys. The gentleman Mulesi, who bought Gatwick Airport, was in King's College. He was, I think, in Kimset, which is about, they left just before I came in. He was also in King's College. And of course, my brother Asri. The rule then was that in King's College, you don't fail. And you could be the son of a rich man, you could be the son of a poor man, it didn't matter. The college equalized everybody. And you competed on social activities, you competed on sports, you competed on academics, and you competed on your capacity to do, on your own personal capacity. And we're all brothers. And anywhere you see a King's College boy, you know he's a King's College boy. We have the same esprit they call ethos. And if you one or two a bit naughty here and there, that's natural. But the foundation, the esprit they call, is always there. So we had no racial understanding of any sort, no tribal understanding. We were just boys. We spoke English. When it was time to fast, people fasted. When it was time to songs and whatever it was, and we were just boys. Okay, it was after I left King's College, came back to Nigeria, I started working, that I realized that some people were Hausa, some people were Igbo, some people were Kanuri, some people were Fufude, some people were Yoruba, some people were Edo. Those things were not an issue when we were in King's College. We were just boys trying to become leaders in Nigeria. And we all competed fairly. We are all good friends even till today. And we all respect one to show him that I loved him and I cared for him. That's all I went to do. So there's no political undertone to it at all. They don't know the story. They don't know the history. Lamido and I, we share common understanding. Our wives were friends. We went on holiday together. So it's not a story that started today, and so on and so forth. So this is the issue. This is what our leaders were trying to do with Nigeria at that time. creating a Nigeria where there was unity, common bond, common understanding, and creating an effort to lift up Nigeria together and make Nigeria what it really should be. And that's really what we want to come back to Nigeria. You know, the first thing we want to do in Nigeria is to change the mindset, to change the thinking, to decarbonize Nigeria, okay? To let Nigeria know that the wholeness of Nigeria is greater, is worth dying for. So the first thing we need to do is to reorientate and to rethink the average Nigerian. The second thing we need to do is to build our values on a family by family basis. The reason why I'm what I am to a large extent is because of what my parents taught me as the first basis. Okay? Whose son are you? This is the right, this is wrong, this is truth, this is false. You must be a good person. We must go back to those family values because it is the family that produces the society and the society that produces the leaders. Most of what we see as leadership failure is really a failure of family values that produce the kind of leaders that we have. People that don't fear God, people that of power and not for the sake of the people. Jesus Christ says those who are going to be leaders must be ministers. And the word minister means servant. A leader is a servant to serve the people, to make sure that the people prosper, to make sure that the people do well, to make sure that the people have good health, the people have agriculture, they have food, they are protected, their interests are protected. That's what a leader is supposed to do, not to lord it over his people. And this is what we need to do, to reorientate the Nigerian, to bring back values into family, to educate the Nigerians. Why should we have 12 million children out of school in 2020? Vanguard, a champion, a course to educate every single Nigerian so that they can think for themselves, so that they can decide what they want to do. And not just educate them, give them education that will make them productive in the future. Technical education where needed, creative education where needed, so that every man can look after himself and not be a liability to society. Okay? So that is the education that we want to give Nigerians, and to create an environment for us. Good roads, good infrastructure, safety, security, opportunity to harness all the resources that God has put into this country. And that's not a big deal. Oil should not be so dominant and so fearful that we don't create an environment where we can harvest bitumen. And the reason why you don't harvest bitumen today is because of resource control and because of the sharing, because the people in whose ground bitumen is being grown are not encouraged to harvest the bitumen because they are saying to themselves, I harvest the bitumen, federal government will take everything, and then I've wasted my effort. So why doesn't federal government reverse that? Okay, the bitumen, the oil is yours. Okay, harvest it, produce it, give federal government a share of it to run the federal government, give all our resources, all our gold, all our timber to come out of the ground like we used to do when we were in regions. Okay, cocoa belonged to where cocoa was grown, oil belonged to where oil was grown, palm kernel belonged to where palm kernel was grown, cotton belonged to where cotton was grown. They had marketing boards that encouraged farmers to grow and harvest these things, and the marketing board will buy this resource from you, add their own profit, and sell it to the world. So it was that profit that Awolowo and Co were using to run government. Why can't we go back to that? Even in California, is telling them that whatever you farm, we will buy, we will store, and we will resell to the rest of the world. Because the farmer is not organized to be able to do that, but they have the ability to grow, to harvest, and to sell. Okay, so you make it comfortable for them. It's the same thing we want to do all over the place. And then the government then makes sure that they can get international demand for what we produce locally. Why should we import marble into Nigeria or granite when granite and marble is growing free of charge in Kogi, in Kwara State? I mean, these are simple things. It is not rocket science. But what is
I think the first step towards the solution to our problems is in the selection of leaders. In 1993, Nigerians voted for an Abiola, whom we believe generally would have made a better leader. Actually, he died exactly 22 years ago today in detention. Today is the anniversary. 22 years ago.
The Abiola family, a lot of them are my friends. I know you are very, very close to him.
Thank you very much. So may so continue to rest in peace. So for you, how do we deal with this problem of election and selection? You are partly Edo, you are partly Ondo. On television, that they are going to cage Wike over. He will not even know what happened. How do you then deal when people cannot select their leaders voluntarily? How do you solve that problem?
I think a lot of us who call ourselves elites or who are a little bit better informed should first of all stop sitting on the fence. A lot of elites or people who are informed, educated, of a good background, pedigree, sit on the fence and say, well, it doesn't concern me. Let me just sort myself out, my wife, my children, send my children to school in England. Now, pandemic has shown us that. And therefore, we don't want to, we're okay. Politicians can do whatever they want and so on and so forth. It is not acceptable. It is unfair to ourselves and it's unfair to Nigeria. Any country is led by the people who can see. Jesus said, when the blind lead the blind, they will make sure everybody falls into a ditch. So the first thing they should get involved sacrificially because Nigeria is worth sacrificing for. The Bible says it was the people that gathered together to make David king. The people gathered together to make Saul king. The people gathered together to make Jeroboam king. The people must gather together. We have evaluated you. We have looked at your CV. We have looked at your credentials. We've looked at how you manage ovation or whatever it is. And we have decided that you have the competence to do what we want and be honest about it. It's not a question of, I want to be your leader, therefore accept me. Decide. But it is the elites that know better. That is, and thinking that Nigeria will work itself out. But nature abhors a vacuum. If you are not ready to take your leadership position, somebody else will take it. And that's what's happened to Nigeria. A lot of us who should know better, we took a back seat. A lot of people in the church told us that politics was dirty. We're not talking politics, we're talking leadership. We're talking empowerment. We're talking making people, making Nigeria a better place. Okay? And it's all worth us putting our places in there. The second thing is that we need to inform Nigerians better. Nigerians need to be better informed, better educated. 1,000 naira from you today and vote for you and doesn't care what happens to him for the next 4 years, thinking that 1,000 naira is what he needs. That's like Esau selling away our birthright. We need to inform Nigerians that it's not a question of 1,000 naira. A road well built into the rural areas is much more than that 1,000 naira. But people will take 1,000 naira and sit in their house and not be able to go to their farms. We need to reorientate them that there's right from wrong, there's better from, there's good from bad, there's better from best. So a few of us need to, we must have leadership criteria like they have in China. And this is what I posted a few months ago, that a person who aspires to leadership, Timothy says, the person that aspires to the office of a deacon must have certain criteria. Husband or one wife, must not be drinking liquor, must not do Nigeria. Number one, you must have minimum education. Number two, you must have character and background of this thing. Number three, you must have proven track record of having led before at any level or at a minimum level. So, for example, if you haven't run a local government successfully in China, forget trying to be a state governor.